All right, hello everyone. So today we're going to be discussing executive leadership policy design, corporate governance, compliance and accountability, stakeholder concerns, and policy monitoring. Now, the topic is important because executive leaders do more than manage daily operations. They shape the direction, standards, and ethical expectations of an organization. So, one of the ways they do this is through policy. So we've talked about policies before, and just understand policies are not just rules written in a handbook. They're leadership tools that guide decision making, define accountability, protect the organization, and communicate what the organization values. So um, after viewing this lecture, you should be able to evaluate a little bit of the best practices for how executive leaders design, implement, monitor, and evaluate policy. You should also be able to design some executive leadership policies that help an organization remain compliant with governance expectations and the law. Okay. So when we're talking about executive leadership policy design, it's the process of creating policies that align with your organization's mission, strategic goals, legal responsibilities, ethical standards, and governance structure. Effective policy design actually begins with your purpose. As a leader, you must ask, why is this policy needed? What is the risk or opportunity, does it address? Who will be affected by the policy? How will it be implemented? And how will we know if it is working? Strong policies are clear, practical, measurable, and enforceable. So if a policy is too vague, your team members or employees might not understand what is expected. If it's too rigid, that can limit professional judgment. So if it is not measurable, then you as a leader may struggle to evaluate whether it's producing the intended outcome. So that actually connects to directly to corporate governance. All right. When we talk about corporate governance, we're referring to a system of rules, structures, practices, and processes that are used to direct and control your organization. Corporate governance defines how decisions are made, how authority is distributed, how risks are managed, and how leaders are held accountable. Good governance helps protect your organization from poor decision making, ethical failures, conflicts of interest, and legal exposure. It also builds trust with your teammates, your board members, employees, investors, customers, regulators, and even your larger community. So one of the important part of corporate governance is board structure, right? So board should you should have board independence, diversity, size, and sustainability practices because they're all going to affect your governance quality. And board independence means that board members can make decisions in the best interest of your organization without being overly influenced by management or personal interests. Independent board members provide oversight, challenge assumptions, and help prevent unchecked executive power. And there are all different types of boards out here. Okay. Um, Board diversity is also essential. A board with diverse experiences, professional backgrounds, cultures, genders, ages, and perspectives is better positioned to understand risk, evaluate strategy, and then respond to stakeholders' concerns. The diversity in your board is going to strengthen decision making because it reduces groupthink and expands the range of questions leaders are willing to ask. And here, I always stop here, and when I'm talking to organizations about developing boards, one of the things that I see a lot is, when I walk in and I see organizations board, and they all look alike. They all act alike, right? They all talk alike. Okay, that is not a diverse board, and it's not, and it's not about color. It's not about gender all the time. But what I mean that they all look alike, right? If your board members are, literally there's no difference, and then when you talk to one, you talk to another, they all saying the same thing over and over. It seems like no one has an independent thought, right? Um, so your board diversity is important. And I love a board. And in my company, TMT side, what we do when we sit down and we talk to people on our board, we got people from all different kind of backgrounds, right? All different kind of experiences. They're not all my age. There's some that are some younger than me. There's some older than me, right? Um, but that is on purpose because because we feel like if we able to have a very diverse board like that, then what we're doing is we're getting information from all sides, all perspectives, and we can make better decisions that way, right? So understand your board size matters as well. A board that's too small, you may lack the expertise needed for effective oversight. But if you have a board that's too large, there might be a struggle with communication, coordination, and decision making. The goal is to have a board large enough to provide expertise but focus to remain effective. Now, let's also talk about sustainability practices, which is another major governance concern. Today, organizations are increasingly expected to consider their environmental, social, and governance responsibility. Sustainability is not about environmental protection. It also includes ethical leadership, responsible resource use, workforce well-being, community impact, and long-term organizational viability, right? And you can turn on, we used to say back in the day, turn on the news, but you can switch to any channels, and you're going to hear something about an organization and then in a violation of their sustainability practice or CEO or VP or somebody, you know, did something that actually is going to hurt, that's going to diminish the ethical leadership that the organization is expected to have, right? So just keep that in mind. So all this is going to lead us to compliance and accountability. Now, when we talk about compliance, that means that the organization follows applicable laws, regulations, policies, contracts, and ethical standards. Accountability means that individuals and leaders are responsible for their decisions, their actions, and their outcomes. And it's two things in my company in TMTSI, and when we talk 3SP leadership, and when we're helping organizations develop their leadership, is two things that we always stress: responsibility and accountability. Who's responsible? Who's accountable? Now, that might be two different people. Somebody's responsible, but the other person is more accountable, right? So you got to always keep that in mind when you talk about compliance. Who's responsible? Who's accountable, right? So executive leaders, they must also design policies that make compliance clear and accountability enforceable. And it can include policies related to ethics, conflict of interest, financial controls, human resources, reporting procedures, data privacy, which is big now, right? Workplace conduct, risk management, and board oversight. That is something that in my company, I proudly say that we monitor and we uphold very closely with not just our leaders, but everybody across the board. It's the same. Our policies are in place for a reason. And it doesn't matter if it's me, the owner, the CEO, or down to a junior consultant, whoever, right? All the policies mean the same thing to everybody. So that's one of the things I can probably say about my company that we focus on and making sure that we let everybody know everybody's accountable and accountability is going to be enforced at all levels, right? So I cannot come in and mistreat my, people that's working with me, my employees or my consultants, my vendors and things like that, because I'm the CEO, right? And I'm not that CEO that wants everybody to agree with me, right? And everything, but there's things that just we have in place to help make sure that our workplace is a place that people want to come to work to and want to work with us, not just because they need a paycheck or they just doing it because of for whatever reasons, right? So compliance should not be treated as a minimal standard for leadership. A compliant organization can lack trust, culture, and ethical strength. And I know organizations like that today, right? And they're struggling. And it doesn't matter who they bring in or, what changes they make, the compliance is not there, All right. And so, and they're not giving compliance, they're not treating it as a standard to be, of leadership. If you're a strong executive leader, you're going to go beyond asking, are we following the rules? A strong executive leader is going to ask, are we doing what is right? What is responsible? Is this aligned with our values? Right? Because, you know, it's difficult in situations, and I'm not talking to rookies here, but it's difficult to, when you got something and you say, well, I got to do what's right, and a lot of people don't like to do what's right, or what's responsible, because it might damage somebody else that they know, or whatever the case may be, or it might, um, give a perception of you don't care, or whatever the case may be. But you got to understand something. You got to do what's right. What is right? I've been in those situations where I had to enforce policies, even though I had a great employee, great team member. The employee clearly violated the policies, and a lot of people thought, because we had a great working rapport, that I was just going to let it slide, and I didn't. Right? I didn't. I actually had to let that employee go, because per our policy, right? And great employee. Oh yeah, it hurt us, because the efforts that employee gave was great, but at the same time, it showed the organization that we're going to be a compliant organization, no matter who you are or who we are, right? So yeah, I've made those decisions before. Um, your stakeholders should also be central to your executive leadership policy design. And we all know stakeholders should be, right? It should be your teammates, your employees, your customers. It can be students, clients, shareholders, board members, regulators, suppliers, community members, anybody affected by your organization's decisions. So understand different stakeholders may have different needs and expectations. For example, employees may be concerned about fairness, workload, professional development, and workplace culture. Customers may be concerned about service quality, transparency, and trust. You got regulators that may be concerned about legal compliance. Your community members may be concerned about social responsibility, or organizational impact. So there can be difference, but as an effective executive leader, we have to be aware of all that. Effective executive leaders do not ignore um, do not ignore they don't ignore them. What they're going to do is feedback to improve policy, reduce risk, and strengthen organizational legitimacy. A policy that looks good from the executive level may not work well if it creates unintended problems for people affected by it. So once policies are designed and implemented, you as a leader must monitor it. Okay, monitor them. Your executive leadership policy monitoring is an ongoing process of reviewing whether your policies are being followed, whether they remain effective, or whether they need revision. Policy monitoring helps you as a leader move from intention to evidence. It's not enough to approve a policy and place it in a manual. Okay, you got to evaluate it. Evaluate how the policy functions in real organizational practice. One tool that can support policy monitoring is often called, I think we call it a BSC, or Balanced Scorecard, right? So a Balanced Scorecard can help you evaluate performance from multiple perspectives. Your perspectives can include financial performance, customer, stakeholder outcomes, internal processes, and learning and growth. Now, in policy monitoring, the BSC can help leaders ask important questions. Financially, is the policy helping the organization manage costs, risk, and resources responsibly? From the stakeholder perspective, is the policy improving trust, service, engagement, or satisfaction? Internally, is the policy improving processes, consistency, and accountability? From a learning and growth perspective, are employees being trained, supported, or developed to meet the policies? So, this kind of balanced evaluation will prevent you from focusing only on one measure of success. A policy may reduce costs but damage employee trust. Policy may improve compliance but create unnecessary process delays. A policy may look effective on paper but fail to support the long-term organizational learning. External company reporting is also another part of governance and accountability. Organizations often report information to external stakeholders through annual reports, sustainability reports, financial statements, compliance reports, accreditation documents, public disclosures, and board reports. So, all these reports can help stakeholders understand how your organization is performing, what risk it faces, and how leaders are fulfilling their responsibilities. When you talk about doing some external reporting, you got to be accurate, transparent, and aligned with the policy. If your organization reports one set of values publicly but operates differently internally, your credibility is going to suffer. Happens all the time with organizations. Strong executive leaders make sure that their internal policy and governance practices, performance measures, and external reporting, they all tell the same story, right? And our 3XP leadership provides this very strong framework in that. So what we do is we look at it through purpose, and our purpose helps leaders design policies that align the mission, align with the mission, the values, strategy, and ethical responsibility. The people part of 3XP leadership reminds leaders to consider the impact of the policy on employees, stakeholders, board members, customers, and the community. The process ensures that policies are clear, implementable, measurable, monitored, and consistently enforced. Performance helps leaders evaluate whether policies are producing the intended outcomes through tools such as the BSC, the Balanced Scorecard, compliance review, stakeholder feedback, or internal reporting. So just know that when you're talking about your executive leadership policy design, it's a critical part of governance. As a leader, you got to create policies that are legally compliant, ethically grounded, strategically aligned, and operationally practical, right? Corporate governance provides that structure. Compliance and accountability provide the standards. Stakeholders' concerns provide the human and social context. Policy monitoring provides the evidence, right? So the external reporting provides the transparency. So when as an executive leader, when you design, implement, monitor, and evaluate policy effectively, you're strengthening the trust, reduce the risk, and improve the performance, and you're guiding your organization in the right direction. Strong policy is not just about control. Strong policy is about responsible leadership, organizational alignment, and sustainable performance.